Our story began not with cities or empires, but with small bands of humans wandering the earth in search of food and shelter. For thousands of years, survival was our only goal. Yet, even in those early days, something extraordinary set us apart: our imagination. Where other creatures adapted only to nature, we dreamed of shaping it. The first sparks of fire lit more than the darkness. They ignited our ability to create. Around the fire, we found warmth, safety, and community. We spoke, we dreamed, and we began to build the foundations of something greater: civilization. Human civilization is more than a story of survival. It is a story of imagination, ambition, and transformation. From the first sparks of fire to the digital age, every step has shaped the world we know today. Our journey began not in great cities or palaces, but on open plains, where our ancestors hunted, gathered, and dreamed beneath the stars. From those humble beginnings came the first villages, the first seeds planted in fertile soil, and the first marks etched into clay tablets. With each discovery, humanity pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Civilization is the thread that connects us across millennia, a tapestry woven from triumphs and struggles, empires that rose and fell, and ideas that changed the course of history. It is the story of how we learned to build, to rule, to believe, and to question. In this story, we will journey across time, from the mysteries of Mesopotamia and the grandeur of Egypt, to the philosophies of Greece, the power of Rome, the flowering of the Renaissance, the revolutions of industry, and the digital frontier of today. This is not just history. It is the story of us all, our past, our present, and the future we are still writing. Before we dive deeper, let me know where you're watching from, and suggest the next story you'd love to watch. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. Long before the first cities rose, humanity's story was written in the footsteps of nomads. For tens of thousands of years, early humans lived as hunter-gatherers, small groups bound together by survival. They tracked herds across vast plains, gathered fruits and roots, and relied on fire to keep away the darkness. Life was fragile. Every day was a test against nature. Yet in this struggle lay the foundations of civilization itself. Cooperation, storytelling, and shared belief gave meaning to existence. Around campfires, knowledge passed from one generation to the next, keeping alive not only survival skills, but also imagination. Then, around 10,000 years ago, everything began to change. In different corners of the world, humanity made a discovery that would transform history: agriculture. Instead of chasing food, we learned to grow it. The planting of seeds along fertile rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, the Nile in Egypt, the Indus in South Asia, and the Yellow River in China, gave rise to permanent settlements. No longer bound to constant movement, people built villages, then towns, and finally the first cities. Agriculture brought abundance, but also complexity. With surplus grain came trade, storage, and the need for protection. Leaders emerged to organize communities, priests rose to interpret the divine, and social hierarchies began to take shape. For the first time, wealth and power could be concentrated and contested. But the true revolution was not only in the fields. It was in the human mind. To manage growing populations and record harvests, humanity invented writing. In Mesopotamia, cuneiform etched into clay tablets captured the details of trade and the myths of gods. In Egypt, hieroglyphs told stories of kings and afterlives. Writing became the bridge between memory and permanence, ensuring that ideas could outlive their creators. Trade networks expanded. Communities exchanged grain, pottery, metals, and ideas. Rivers became lifelines of commerce, carrying goods and culture from one civilization to another. Alongside prosperity, the seeds of inequality also grew. Social classes hardened, farmers and laborers at the base, rulers and priests above, kings at the very top. Civilization brought order, but it also brought division. And yet, for all its struggles, this period marked the dawn of human greatness. From wandering bands of hunters, We had become builders of cities, creators of knowledge, and architects of society. The journey from nomad to settler was not only about survival, it was about vision. It was the first step in humanity's long climb toward the modern world. As humanity settled into fertile valleys, entire worlds began to emerge, civilizations whose legacies still echo through our lives today. From the deserts of Egypt to the plains of Mesopotamia, from the Indus River to the Yellow River, and across oceans to the temples of Mesoamerica, each civilization carried its own brilliance. In Mesopotamia, the land between rivers, humanity built its first true cities. Uruk, Babylon, Nineveh, centers of trade, law, and learning. Here, the Code of Hammurabi laid down one of the earliest systems of written law, declaring that even kings were bound to justice. Towering ziggurats rose toward the heavens, not only as temples but as symbols of humanity's quest to bridge earth and sky. In Mesopotamia, mathematics and astronomy flourished, guiding farmers in their harvests and priests in their rituals. Along the Nile, Egypt perfected the art of enduring splendor. The pyramids of Giza, vast monuments of stone, were more than tombs. They were statements of divine kingship, built to ensure that pharaohs would reign forever, both in life and in death. Hieroglyphs carved into temple walls told of gods and rulers, victories and ceremonies. The Egyptians mastered engineering, medicine, and measurement, creating calendars to align their lives with the rhythms of the river that sustained them. Far to the east, in the Indus Valley, a quieter civilization flourished. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa revealed astonishing urban planning, streets laid out in grids, homes with private baths, and sophisticated drainage systems. Though their script remains undeciphered, their organization speaks of a society deeply concerned with order, cleanliness, and community well-being. Trade reached distant lands, carrying Indus goods to Mesopotamia and beyond, evidence of early global connection. In China, civilization took root along the Yellow River. Dynasties rose and fell, yet each left its mark. Bronze casting, silk weaving, and oracle bones etched with early Chinese writing reflected a society bound to ritual and ancestry. Kings ruled not merely with force but with the mandate of heaven, a belief that rulers governed with divine approval, so long as they maintained harmony and justice. Mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy grew here, laying the intellectual foundations that would shape East Asia for centuries. Across the oceans, in Mesoamerica, another story unfolded. The Olmecs, and later the Maya and Aztec, built temples that pierced the jungle canopy. They charted the movements of stars with extraordinary precision, creating calendars that rival modern accuracy. Their pyramids, carved with images of gods and rulers, echoed the same human impulse seen in Egypt, to connect heaven and earth through stone. What united these great civilizations was not only their achievements in science, art, and governance, but their vision of the sacred. Religion, myth, and kingship gave meaning to human struggle. Rulers were not merely political leaders, they were divine intermediaries, chosen to maintain cosmic balance. Myths explained the cycles of the sun, the flooding of rivers, the mysteries of life and death. Civilization's greatest monuments, the pyramids of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the temples of Mesoamerica, were built not for the living alone, but for the gods, the ancestors, and the eternal. These structures, enduring thousands of years, reveal a truth, that human civilization has always sought to leave its mark, to outlive mortality through stone, story, and faith. Yet alongside grandeur came inequality. Social hierarchies grew sharper. Farmers toiled while kings and priests amassed power. Slaves and laborers built the monuments that still inspire awe. Civilization elevated humanity to new heights, but it also divided us into rulers and ruled, rich and poor, free and bound. And still, within these contradictions lay the heartbeat of progress. Civilization became the crucible of innovation, faith, and ambition. From Egypt's pyramids to China's philosophies, from Mesopotamia's laws to Mesoamerica's astronomy, these societies laid the foundations upon which the modern world still stands. Their gods may have faded, their empires may have crumbled, but their ideas remain. Every time we write, calculate, measure the stars, or live under a system of laws, we are heirs to their vision. As the great river civilizations matured, new powers emerged to redefine what it meant to be human. In the lands of Greece and Rome, ideas and institutions took root that still shape our world today. In Greece, a new experiment unfolded: democracy. In the city-state of Athens, citizens gathered in open assemblies to debate laws and make collective decisions. While limited to a privileged few, it was the first step toward a concept that would echo through millennia: that people could govern themselves. Alongside politics came philosophy. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle wrestled with questions of truth, justice, and the nature of existence. Their ideas formed the intellectual bedrock of Western thought. Art and architecture flourished. Temples crowned with marble columns, statues carved with lifelike detail, and dramas performed in vast amphitheaters all reflected a society that placed beauty, reason, and expression at its core. Science, too, advanced. Astronomy, mathematics, and medicine were studied with a spirit of inquiry that sought to explain the natural world. Rome inherited and expanded upon Greece's legacy, building not just ideas but empires. From a small city on the Tiber River, Rome rose to dominate the Mediterranean. Roman law codified principles of justice, rights, and citizenship, many of which still guide modern legal systems. Their engineering feats were unparalleled: roads stretching for thousands of miles, aqueducts carrying water to bustling cities, amphitheaters that hosted tens of thousands. The Colosseum, with its arches and grandeur, remains a testament to Rome's mastery of stone and spectacle. But the empire carried costs. Rome's legions spread order and culture, yet they also brought conquest and slavery. Still, in the blending of peoples and traditions, new ideas flourished. Out of this melting pot, a small and persecuted faith, Christianity, began its rise. What started with the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth spread across the empire, promising salvation and equality of souls. By the 4th century, Christianity transformed from a minority sect to the official religion of Rome, reshaping Europe's spiritual landscape forever. Far beyond the Mediterranean, other faiths were taking root. In India, Buddhism spread along trade routes, teaching compassion, meditation, and the search for enlightenment. In the Arabian Peninsula, Islam would emerge in the 7th century, proclaiming the message of one God and uniting vast lands under a shared faith. These religions, born in different regions, carried universal visions of morality, community, and the divine, visions that still shape billions of lives today. Binding these worlds together was the Silk Road. Stretching from China to Rome, it was more than a trade route, it was a corridor of culture. Along its dusty paths traveled silk, spices, glass, and gold. But just as important as goods were the ideas, philosophies, technologies, and beliefs passed from one civilization to another. A Chinese compass might find its way west, while Greek astronomy influenced scholars in the east. Buddhism moved across mountains to China, while Islam and Christianity spread along the same roads to new frontiers. The Classical Age was a time of empires and exchanges, of brilliant achievements and profound transformations. Greece gave the world its first taste of democracy and philosophy. Rome built laws and infrastructures that became the backbone of governance. Religions arose that redefined humanity's spiritual horizon. And across continents, the Silk Road wove together a tapestry of cultures, proving that civilization was no longer isolated, but interconnected. The legacy of this age endures, in the laws we follow, the questions we ask, the faiths we practice, and the global connections we continue to build. The world had become larger, yet more connected than ever before. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century, Europe entered an age of uncertainty. The roads that once connected distant provinces crumbled, trade routes shrank, and power shifted into the hands of local rulers. Protection and survival became the order of the day. This new system was called feudalism. Kings granted land to lords, lords relied on knights for military service, and peasants worked the fields in exchange for protection. It was a rigid hierarchy where everyone had a place, from serf to sovereign. Castles, built of stone and towering over the countryside, served as both homes and fortresses. Knights clad in armor embodied ideals of loyalty and chivalry, though in reality, warfare was brutal and survival uncertain. Religion was at the heart of daily life. The church provided stability where kingdoms faltered. Cathedrals rose above villages and towns, their stained glass windows flooding interiors with colored light, inspiring awe and devotion. Life revolved around the rhythms of worship, harvest, and community. While Europe struggled to rebuild, another world was thriving. In the Islamic world, from Spain across North Africa to the Middle East, a brilliant era of learning and innovation was unfolding. Known today as the Islamic Golden Age, this period, spanning roughly the 8th to 13th centuries, became a beacon of knowledge. In Baghdad, the House of Wisdom gathered scholars from many lands. Ancient Greek texts, works of Aristotle, Hippocrates, and Ptolemy, were translated into Arabic. But the scholars did more than preserve knowledge, they expanded it. Mathematicians like Al-Khwarizmi developed algebra, giving us the very word we use today. Astronomers refined measurements of the heavens, improving calendars and navigation. Medicine advanced through the writings of Avicenna, whose canon of medicine was studied in Europe for centuries. Philosophy thrived as well. Thinkers such as Averroes in Spain explored the relationship between faith and reason, influencing Christian scholars like Thomas Aquinas. In Córdoba, libraries housed hundreds of thousands of manuscripts at a time when most of Europe's libraries contained only a handful. The Islamic Golden Age was not only intellectual, it was cultural. Cities like Baghdad, Cairo, and Córdoba were centers of art, music, architecture, and commerce. Innovations in irrigation, trade, and engineering sustained growing populations and vibrant economies. At a time when Europe was fractured, the Islamic world was a crossroads of civilizations, connecting Asia, Africa, and Europe through ideas and goods. By the 12th century, Europe began to stir once more. Contact with the Islamic world, through trade, travel, and even the conflict of the Crusades, reintroduced lost knowledge. Europeans encountered new crops, technologies like the astrolabe, and medical practices far more advanced than their own. Universities in Bologna, Paris, and Oxford began to rise, where students debated theology, law, and the nature of existence. Slowly, the seeds of renewal were planted. The Middle Ages, often remembered only for knights and castles, were far more complex. They were an era of contrasts, faith and doubt, poverty and splendor, isolation and exchange. While feudal Europe endured its struggles, the Islamic Golden Age carried the torch of knowledge, illuminating a path that would one day spark Europe's own awakening. From the ashes of Rome and the brilliance of Baghdad, the world was preparing for the next great chapter, a rebirth of learning, art, and exploration that would come to be known as the Renaissance. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 sent shockwaves across Europe, but it also lit the spark of renewal. As scholars fled westward, they carried with them the manuscripts of ancient Greece and Rome. These precious texts, preserved through centuries, ignited what would become the Renaissance, literally, a rebirth. In cities like Florence, Venice, and Milan, artists, philosophers, and patrons found themselves inspired by the wisdom of the ancients. Humanism, the intellectual heart of the Renaissance, shifted focus from purely divine concerns to the potential and dignity of humankind. Art took on new life. Leonardo da Vinci's sketches revealed not just beauty, but anatomy and mechanics. Michelangelo's David symbolized both human perfection and defiance. Architecture, too, was transformed, with Brunelleschi's dome rising over Florence as a symbol of ingenuity. But it was not only art that flourished. Knowledge began to spread in ways unimaginable just a century before. In 1440, Johannes Gutenberg introduced the movable type printing press. Suddenly, books, once painstakingly copied by hand, could be mass-produced. This revolution in communication meant that ideas, discoveries, and debates no longer stayed confined to monasteries or royal courts. They spread to scholars, merchants, and eventually common citizens, fueling literacy and creating a hunger for learning. As Europe looked inward to rediscover the wisdom of the past, it also looked outward. The 15th and 16th centuries became an age of exploration, driven by curiosity, ambition, and the pursuit of wealth. Christopher Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492, convinced he had reached Asia but instead landed in the Caribbean, an encounter that would forever reshape both the Old and New worlds. Vasco da Gama sailed around Africa's Cape of Good Hope to reach India, opening new maritime trade routes. Ferdinand Magellan's expedition, though he did not survive the journey, achieved the first circumnavigation of the globe, proving that Earth was indeed a sphere connected by vast oceans. These voyages were not merely geographical triumphs, they were cultural and economic revolutions. The Columbian Exchange carried crops, animals, and unfortunately, diseases across continents. Potatoes and maize traveled to Europe, while horses and wheat transformed the Americas. The world was becoming interconnected, setting the stage for globalization centuries before the term existed. At the same time, new ways of thinking began to challenge tradition. The scientific revolution was not a single event, but a series of breakthroughs that redefined humanity's place in the universe. Nicholas Copernicus dared to suggest that the Earth revolved around the Sun, overturning centuries of geocentric belief. Galileo Galilei's telescope revealed moons orbiting Jupiter, while Johannes Kepler described the elliptical paths of planets. Isaac Newton, synthesizing these discoveries, revealed the laws of motion and gravity, principles that explained not just celestial mechanics but the very forces governing life on Earth. This pursuit of knowledge spilled into every discipline. Medicine advanced as Andreas Vesalius dissected the human body with precision, challenging medieval misconceptions. In chemistry, Robert Boyle laid the groundwork for modern science, while explorers of the natural world catalogued species with a rigor that foreshadowed biology. The intellectual momentum of the scientific revolution fed directly into the Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries. Philosophers such as John Locke, Voltaire, and Montesquieu argued that reason, not tradition, should guide human affairs. Locke's ideas of natural rights, life, liberty, and property would inspire revolutions across the Atlantic world. Montesquieu's theories of government shaped modern democracies. Voltaire championed freedom of expression, insisting that progress could only come when individuals were free to question authority. The Enlightenment was not merely a period of abstract thought, it was a blueprint for modern society. The salons of Paris buzzed with debate, while printed pamphlets spread revolutionary ideas to the masses. Science and reason were elevated as guiding principles, and for the first time, humanity began to see itself not as bound by divine fate, but as capable of shaping its own destiny. From the rediscovery of classical wisdom to the global voyages of exploration, from the rise of science to the dawning of Enlightenment thought, this era was nothing less than the turning point of human civilization. It bridged the medieval world with the modern, laying foundations for democracy, industry, and the scientific age that continues to shape our lives today. The hum of machinery, the hiss of steam, and the clang of iron marked the dawn of a new age. In the late 18th century, humanity experienced a transformation so profound that it rivaled the agricultural revolution itself. This was the Industrial Revolution, a period where innovation, fueled by coal and steam, reshaped not just economies but the very fabric of society. At the heart of this revolution was the steam engine. James Watt's improvements in the 1770s turned it into a reliable power source, driving machinery, pumping mines, and propelling locomotives and ships. No longer dependent solely on human or animal muscle, or the fickle power of wind and water, societies now harnessed energy on a scale previously unimaginable. Factories sprang up in Britain, the first nation to industrialize, where textiles were woven by mechanical looms and cotton was spun at breathtaking speed. The railway soon followed, linking cities and regions with iron tracks that carried goods and people faster than ever before. What once took weeks by horse and cart could now be completed in days or even hours. The railroad was not just a tool of commerce, it was a symbol of progress, binding nations together in networks of steel. But progress came with a price. The Industrial Revolution accelerated urbanization. Rural families, drawn by the promise of wages, left their fields and flocked to cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and later, New York and Berlin. Populations exploded. Yet, the booming cities were often ill-prepared. Overcrowded housing, poor sanitation, and pollution became the new realities of urban life. Smokestacks blackened skies, while rivers turned dark with factory waste. Alongside this physical transformation emerged a new economic order, capitalism in its modern form. Industrialists, financiers, and merchants amassed fortunes, while banks and stock markets expanded to fuel growth. A new middle class, the bourgeoisie, rose to prominence, defined not by land ownership but by enterprise and capital. For many, this was the era of opportunity. But for countless others, it was a struggle for survival. The factory floor became a world of relentless discipline. Workers toiled for long hours, often 12 to 16 a day, under harsh conditions. Child labor was widespread. Boys and girls as young as 8 worked in textile mills or crawled through coal mines. Women, too, labored beside men, earning far less for the same grueling tasks. Industrial accidents were frequent, and safety nets were virtually non-existent. These conditions gave rise to new social challenges and demands for change. The early labor movement emerged as workers began to organize. They fought for shorter hours, safer environments, and the right to a living wage. Strikes and protests swept across industrial cities, often met with resistance from factory owners and governments alike. But over time, the pressure could not be ignored. Workers' rights became central to political debates, leading eventually to reforms such as child labor laws, trade unions, and the 8-hour workday. The turbulence of the Industrial Revolution also spilled into politics and revolution. Inspired by Enlightenment ideals, oppressed populations challenged old hierarchies. The French Revolution at the close of the 18th century had already shown the world that kings could be toppled. In the 19th century, waves of revolution swept across Europe, most notably in 1848, demanding democracy, nationalism, and social justice. Meanwhile, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, observing the plight of the working class, formulated communism as a radical alternative to capitalism, laying out their vision in the Communist Manifesto. Beyond Europe, industrial power fueled colonial empires. Nations hungry for raw materials, cotton from India, rubber from Africa, tea from China, expanded their reach across the globe. Colonies provided resources and markets, but they also endured exploitation, violence, and cultural disruption. The wealth of Europe and America grew, often at the expense of colonized peoples. And yet, amid these upheavals, human society advanced in ways unimaginable just generations before. Railways and steamships shrank the world, while telegraphs made communication nearly instantaneous. Factories produced goods on a massive scale, raising living standards for some, while also deepening inequality. Urbanization created challenges, but also opportunities. Public education, new forms of entertainment, and eventually, public health reforms that improved life expectancy. The Industrial Revolution was a paradox, an age of invention and exploitation, of prosperity and poverty, of liberation and oppression. It gave humanity tools to dominate nature, but also forced societies to confront the moral and social consequences of unchecked growth. More than just a chapter in history, it was the beginning of the modern age, one that continues to shape our world of machines, markets, and movements. The 20th century began with optimism. Science, industry, and empire seemed to promise endless progress. But beneath the surface, rivalries simmered, and the century soon revealed itself as one of both devastating conflict and unprecedented transformation. In 1914, the world was drawn into the First World War, sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, but fueled by nationalism, imperial competition, and tangled alliances. For 4 years, Europe became a battlefield of trenches, barbed wire, and relentless artillery. Millions perished in what was called the War to End All Wars. The old empires, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian, collapsed, reshaping the global order. Yet peace proved fragile. Barely 2 decades later, a second and even more destructive conflict erupted. World War II unleashed horrors on a scale humanity had never seen. Mechanized armies, aerial bombings, concentration camps, and nuclear weapons. Adolf Hitler's rise in Nazi Germany, combined with fascism in Italy and militarism in Japan, set the world ablaze. By the war's end in 1945, over 70 million lives had been lost. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki marked not just the close of the war, but the dawn of the nuclear age. From the ashes of war emerged 2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their ideological struggle, capitalism versus communism, defined the Cold War era. While direct conflict was avoided, proxy wars in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, alongside the nuclear arms race, kept the world on edge. Yet amid the rivalry came breakthroughs. The space race sent humans beyond Earth's atmosphere. In 1961, Yuri Gagarin became the first man in space. 8 years later, Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, proclaiming, "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." As empires weakened after the world wars, a tide of decolonization swept across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Nations long under colonial rule demanded independence. India achieved freedom in 1947, inspiring others from Ghana to Indonesia to follow. While the road was not always smooth, marked by partition, civil wars, and Cold War interference, the dismantling of empires reshaped the global map and gave rise to dozens of new sovereign states. Parallel to political change, the world witnessed a revolution in human rights. The Holocaust had shown the consequences of unchecked hatred, prompting the founding of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. Civil rights movements in the United States, anti-apartheid struggles in South Africa, feminist campaigns, and LGBTQ+ activism all worked to expand the boundaries of equality and justice. Slowly, democracy spread, as people across continents demanded representation and freedom. Meanwhile, technology accelerated at an astonishing pace. The invention of computers transformed communication, industry, and knowledge itself. What began as room-sized machines evolved into personal computers, then laptops, and eventually the smartphones we carry in our pockets. The creation of the Internet connected the globe, shrinking distances as email, social media, and instant messaging reshaped how humans interacted. Entire economies shifted, with information and technology at their core. Globalization became the defining force of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Goods, ideas, and cultures flowed across borders with unprecedented ease. Economies became interconnected. What happened in one nation could ripple across the globe. A factory strike in Asia could affect markets in America. Financial crises in one region could spark global recessions. This interconnectedness brought prosperity to some, lifting millions out of poverty, while also deepening inequalities and sparking debates about sustainability, fairness, and cultural identity. Yet even as globalization expanded horizons, humanity continued to face shared challenges. Climate change, pandemics, and political polarization have tested the resilience of nations and individuals alike. Still, history shows humanity's remarkable capacity to adapt and innovate. From the horrors of world wars to the triumph of space exploration, from colonial oppression to the spread of democracy, the story of the modern world is one of both struggle and progress. Today, as humans live in an age of satellites, supercomputers, and artificial intelligence, we remain connected not only by trade and technology but by a common future. The history of human civilization has been a long journey, from the first stone tools to the digital cloud, from isolated tribes to a global community. And while the challenges of tomorrow remain uncertain, the resilience and creativity of humanity suggest that the story is far from finished. As the 21st century unfolds, humanity stands at a crossroads. Our species has come far, from fire and stone to skyscrapers and satellites, but the challenges we face today are unlike any in our past. They are global, interconnected, and existential. One of the greatest of these challenges is climate change. For centuries, the engines of progress, coal, oil, and gas, have powered factories, fueled cars, and lit cities. Yet they have also filled the atmosphere with greenhouse gases, trapping heat and altering the delicate balance of Earth's climate. Rising global temperatures melt glaciers, raise sea levels, and intensify storms, threatening coastal cities and vulnerable populations. Wildfires rage with unprecedented ferocity. Droughts and floods disrupt agriculture, endangering food supplies. Climate change is not a distant concern. It is here, shaping the lives of millions and demanding urgent action. But alongside these challenges, humanity continues to innovate. Artificial intelligence represents the next great leap in our technological journey. Machines are no longer just tools, they are becoming partners in thought and creation. AI systems translate languages, diagnose diseases, drive vehicles, and even compose music or art. In industry, AI optimizes production. In science, it accelerates discovery. Yet, with its promise comes unease. What does it mean for work, for ethics, for human identity, when machines can think, learn, and create? The debate over AI is not simply about technology. It is about what kind of future we wish to build. Beyond our planet, humanity's gaze turns once more to the stars. Space, once the realm of myth and imagination, is now a field of exploration and ambition. Private companies and national agencies alike dream of colonizing Mars, mining asteroids, and building permanent bases on the Moon. For some, space colonization represents survival, a way to ensure humanity endures should Earth become uninhabitable. For others, it is the ultimate expression of human curiosity, the next step in our endless quest to explore and expand. Just as the seafarers of the 15th century crossed oceans, so too may future generations cross interplanetary frontiers. These pursuits, fighting climate change, developing AI, and reaching into space, highlight a truth: no single nation can meet these challenges alone. Global cooperation has never been more vital. International agreements like the Paris Climate Accord, partnerships in space exploration, and cross-border scientific collaborations remind us that our fates are intertwined. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed both the fragility of global systems and the power of collective action, as scientists around the world work together to create vaccines in record time. Yet cooperation is not guaranteed. Political divisions, economic rivalries, and cultural conflicts threaten to fracture unity at a time when unity is essential. The story of human civilization has always been one of tension between conflict and cooperation, between division and solidarity. The stakes today are higher than ever. Whether humanity can rise above its divisions may determine not just the future of civilization, but the survival of our species. And so, the story remains unwritten. We stand on the edge of possibilities both thrilling and terrifying. Will we conquer climate change, harness AI responsibly, and step boldly into the cosmos? Or will we falter, overwhelmed by the very forces we have unleashed? Human civilization is not a finished tale but an unfolding one. Each generation adds its chapter, sometimes in struggle, sometimes in triumph. From the first spark of fire to the vast digital networks of today, the journey has been marked by resilience, creativity, and ambition. The future, as always, belongs to those willing to imagine it. From the first spark of fire struck by early humans, our story began. We wandered as hunter-gatherers, then settled with the agricultural revolution, building villages, cities, and civilizations along the rivers of Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and China. From pyramids to philosophies, empires to trade routes, ancient societies laid the foundations of law, science, art, and belief. The Middle Ages brought struggle and renewal. While Europe endured feudalism, the Islamic Golden Age advanced knowledge, and the Renaissance reignited curiosity. The printing press spread ideas, explorers connected continents, and the scientific revolution changed how we understood the universe. The Industrial Revolution transformed economies and daily life with steam, steel, and factories, but also brought inequality and struggle, sparking calls for rights and democracy. The 20th century saw war on a global scale, yet also decolonization, human rights movements, and extraordinary technological advances. Humanity stepped onto the moon, built computers, and created a digital world that connects billions today. Now, in our century, we face challenges and opportunities of unprecedented scale: climate change, artificial intelligence, and the dream of space colonization. These tests remind us that civilization survival depends not on conflict, but on cooperation. Through it all, one truth endures: civilization is not the story of one people, but of all people. It is a shared journey of imagination, resilience, and ambition. From stone tools to skyscrapers, from village firesides to global networks, humanity has always moved forward, not without struggle, but always with hope. The story of human civilization is far from finished, and the next chapter is ours to write. If this journey inspired you, show your support by liking this video and subscribing for more powerful stories from history. And in the comments, tell me which era, civilization, or untold story you'd love us to explore next. Together, let's keep the past alive to inspire the future.